And we are back on Open Line. We thank you for joining us this evening here. Chuck Long here with Clint Kelly, attorney Clint Kelly. We were talking about issues that can happen at the doctor, issues that can happen at the hospital. Something goes wrong, you don't know what to do, you're not sure who to call, who to talk to. These are the answers we're hoping to give you this evening. We are going back to the lines with us, and if you do have a question or a comment, make sure you give us a call. That number is on your screen, 737-7587. So as we go back to the lines, Jay is online with us. Jay, thank you for your patience, and do you have a question or a comment for Clint?
Yes, I do. First of all, thanks for taking my call, and I appreciate what he does. That's a big job what he does.
It is.
First of all, me and my family was having dinner the other night, and we had a discussion. My mom, when I was little, she's severely allergic to penicillin, and she was given the wrong medicine by a pharmacist who is a family friend. And he gave her the wrong medicine, and she about passed away. But luckily, he took responsibility. He paid for all the bills, took care of her, and of course my mom didn't want to sue him and all that. But I was just wondering if you've ever had to deal with pharmacists giving out the wrong medications, and I'll hang up and listen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Jay, I have. I've had a number of cases where that occurs, and that actually is beginning to occur more frequently because of the way that the pharmacy system is set up now. There is very little one-to-one relationship between the pharmacist and the customer because there's a lot of pharmacist turnover, whether it's at Walgreens or Rite Aid or what's the other one? CVS. Yeah, sometimes you don't see the same pharmacist within a month or two.
Right.
And so the types of cases I see is where they get the dosage wrong. I have had cases where they've given the wrong drug. I have yet to have somebody that was badly injured from this, except I had one lady that was prescribed 3 times the dose of tramadol, wound up having seizures, had to go to the emergency room, and it took about 6 months to a year for her to recover from that. But you're going to see more and more cases of people taking pills that are either the wrong pills or the wrong dosage. And unfortunately, if you look at your pill bottle, you open it up and you'll see there's more and more generic drugs from multiple manufacturers, and so the pills will look one way. Say a pill made by Watson will be a white football-shaped pill, and then another pill made by Mallinckrodt will be pink and shaped a different way, and you just think, well, it must be the right pill, and turns out, you're supposed to be taking Lipitor, and it winds up being Xanax. And so this is going to be an ongoing problem, unfortunately, because of the way that the pharmacy system is set up right now.
Well, and another challenge, I have a friend, and to me this was a serious thing, happened a few years back, but went to the dentist, had the anesthetic and the numbing, and then after the procedure, lost his hearing in his right ear. The dentist was a friend of his, didn't want to necessarily at that time sue, but as a result, that has been years and years of problems that he encountered, and it wasn't necessarily about suing the dentist, but he could have used the help that the situation could have presented with him had he called a firm like yours and said, what do I do? What's the best thing to do in that situation?
I wonder in retrospect if he would have called if he had known.
I think absolutely.
If he'd known then what he knows now. And in particular for people who have an injury that impacts their ability to earn a living. If he had, if he wore, say, an air traffic controller and had to wear headphones, imagine what that would do to his ability to earn a living. But it's really no less important than somebody who likes to go to the symphony and listen to music. Or someone who enjoys spending time in quiet conversations at a coffee shop. Those types of things are very, very important to people, and they think, well, I don't want to sue my doctor, and then a year, 2, 3, 5 years goes by, and then they think, I've really been messed up, and I should be able to hold that doctor accountable, and they don't call within the year, and they don't get to bring a case because they waited too long.
Yeah, and that's the situation.
Again, pick up the phone and call because it costs you nothing.
That's right. All right, we are going back to our lines right now. Denise is on the line with us. Denise, we're glad you called in this evening. Do you have a question or a comment for Clint?
Yes, I was just calling, and I probably needed him to reiterate. In my circumstances, I have a missed brain tumor. Although benign, it has grown, and it was approximately 4 years from the date of the first CAT scan, where the neurologist never even looked at the disc until the oncologist found it. And my question is, I heard him briefly say something about someone being incompetent but I couldn't even think for myself till the radiation was complete. Is it too late to file?
Okay.
I mean, I've made the statement to the doctor how he's ruined my life because this tumor is inoperable. I couldn't even have it biopsied, and now it's leaning on my main sinus vein.
Denise, have you been declared incompetent by a court of law in Tennessee?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. The odds are the statute is run and that there's not going to be an exception or a bypass around it. And I want to talk about Denise's situation here because this is one of the things that really gets me hot. Our state passed tort reform in 2010 when the legislature changed over and the Republicans took control with the Republican governor. We passed tort reform, and one of the first things the legislature did, they changed the law of incompetence. Used to be if a patient were drugged up, or a patient had a mental issue, or say in Denise's case had a brain tumor and their decision-making ability was impaired, the law gave the patient the right to argue that they were mentally unable to make reasonable decisions such that the statute of limitations would not operate against them. Because it wasn't fair. We don't start the clock on somebody who doesn't even know the clock's running. First thing the legislature did is say the only way you can prove you're incompetent is a court of law must make that judgment. Now, how many people in a hospital with a tumor like Denise are going to get to go to court, go through a proceeding that's going to take time, and have a judge declare them incompetent in order to stop the statute of limitations and have the right to sue? It was purely a means by which to stop a certain group of lawsuits. That's all its intended effect was. It helped nobody but the doctors and the hospitals and the other people, companies that hurt folks. And so I don't have any good news for Denise other than say I really sympathize for you because that law, Denise, is awful.
And in that situation, I mean, it's basically contact your legislator and
see if you can get the law changed, and good luck with that. I mean, right now in the environment, the business-friendly environment that we have in the legislature, patients are the ones that are having to basically shoulder the burden of companies and healthcare providers being able to maximize their profits.
Yeah. All right. Well, Denise, we are sorry to hear about your situation, but we do appreciate you calling in this evening. We are going to go back to the lines right now, and Donna is on the line with us. So, Donna, thank you for calling in. And do you have a question or a comment for Clint?
I have a question, please.
Okay, go ahead.
My sister, during a chemo session, the nurse missed the vein, and the chemo went under the skin. It burned her. She battled infection for months and finally had to have surgery to remove that part of her arm. So now it looks like a shark bitter. And she says, well, I said, why don't you call an attorney? And she says, well, I signed a consent form to treat. So, I don't have any right. That's what she thinks.
Okay. She's wrong. Sounds like what you are describing is what's known as infiltration, if I understand it correctly. And I don't know what the procedure is in particular, Donna, but if I give you an example, if someone injects or puts an IV into someone's hand or arm the wrong way and they miss the vein and the chemical, whatever the drug is, goes into the tissues, some drugs can really damage tissues badly. You can burn somebody's arm badly or hand if you miss the vein. Now, I don't know if that's how the chemo was being delivered, but the broader point that Donna mentions is just because you sign a consent form authorizing the procedure does not mean you consent to negligence. I mean, let me repeat that. Consenting to a procedure does not equate to consenting to negligence. They still have to do the procedure reasonably and properly, and if they don't, the patient has a claim against the provider. All that consent form does is operate to allow the provider to do it so that they're not basically doing an unauthorized procedure. But beyond that, the consent form does not operate to cloak the healthcare provider with immunity for screwing up in a procedure.
Okay, so, well, Donna, thank you very much for calling in this evening. Hope that that advice helps.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you. We are talking about situations that no one wants to happen, but when one of these situations happens, whether it's at the doctor's office, whether it's at the hospital, you do need to know what to do. And one of the main things that you can do is give your office a call, but also kind of take some responsibility to start documenting, I would think, as much as you can, and so that you have all the facts, because a lot of times, even if a week or two passes, you're not as clear in the situation as you are obviously on the day that things start happening.
Exactly. The first thing that I counsel people to do in terms of going forward is, if you think something wrong is happening, absolutely start documenting and take pictures if it involves physical injuries that can be observed. There is no substitute for pictures. I mean, it's the true thing. It's worth 1,000 words. Make sure that you're keeping a record or a diary of what's going on, so when you call me or meet with me and you have information or evidence to present, I can actually look at it and see how things took place over a timeline. And if I've got pictures, particularly of injuries or of situations going on in a room, and there's nothing wrong with taking pictures, it's perfectly legal, that will tell me better than anything exactly what's going on. And juries pay great attention to pictures. Now, I've got a case right now, Chuck, with a guy who got a blood clot at the bottom of his spine from a spinal fusion, because blood leaked down at the bottom of his spinal cord, and the clot was as big as a baseball. And for whatever reason that I can't understand, the surgeon and the surgeon's assistant did not come back to the hospital and treat the blood clot after the surgery. Now this man's paralyzed from the waist down. And the medical records mention the bleeding, they mention a hematoma, they do not describe how big it is or what it looks like. This picture is unbelievable. I mean, you look at that bleeding, you look at that blood clot, any doctor would look at that and say, that is bad news. Somebody needs to come in there and deal with that. So if you think something bad is happening in the hospital or something that's an injury has occurred, get evidence. There's nothing wrong with that, and bring it to me or someone else that you go to, because it can make the difference between winning or losing.
Okay, great advice. Going back to the lines right now, George is on the line with us. George, we're glad that you called in this evening. And do you have a question or a comment?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
My wife was admitted when she was taken to the hospital, and on the kind of high blood pressure, and after going and getting her blood checked, they sent her to Middle Tennessee Mental Health for evaluation. And she was there 1 day and a half, and she fell and broke her neck and her right arm. And they didn't let us know anything about it. And then from the people there in charge or whatever sent her to Summit Hospital. Summit Hospital couldn't help her, and they set up a trauma team at Skyline. And at Skyline, she had to have a tracheotomy and all to keep living. And they kept her until her insurance, until they said she'd have to leave and go to rehab. And so she went to rehab, and from rehab she stayed until the insurance company said she had to leave. The time was up, and she just been in one place to the other, and the insurance said she had to keep moving. And now at this moment she is in Nashville Community Care with the tubes, and been having to being fed by tubes, and she is in bed all times, can't get up, and can't talk.
George, I got some questions for you. The first question I have is, why did she fall at Middle Tennessee Mental Health?
You there?
Yes, sir.
We don't know. They never have told us. She was at the Middle Tennessee Tennessee mental health for like a 72-hour for evaluation. We don't know how she failed. How coming? And they haven't explained anything to us there.
And how old's your wife?
She is 86.
Falls fall into, use the word twice, but they go into two categories. The first is someone who is a known fall risk. The hospital is supposed to take reasonable precautions to protect patients from a fall risk. Nowadays, you see signs on the walls in most hospitals that basically advise patients and also the staff, don't move, don't get up without calling us because you may fall. And patients who fall in those situations, they didn't bring up the bed rails, those are fairly good cases to bring. You can prove those to a jury fairly well, and if the injury's bad enough, get compensated. The second type of fall case is the case where a patient falls because they're old or they're infirm, or perhaps they have some type of injury, walking from one place to the next. Or in some cases where the patient has an inability to follow commands properly and falls. Those cases can be a little bit more difficult because the question then becomes, did the hospital know that the patient was a fall risk? Because sometimes these things happen even when the hospital staff are following protocol. I don't know which this falls in, Chuck, or George, I don't know where your wife falls in, which category, but it seems to me that if I were you, I would contact Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute and ask to speak to the director of the hospital and ask them directly, what happened to my wife? Why did she fall? Now, they may not answer your question. They may blow you off, in which case that's when you want to definitely call me or call another lawyer and have it investigated. But they might also tell you what happened, and then you can make a judgment from there whether or not you think it's worth pursuing in the legal realm. But that's something that I would ask the staff at the hospital more information about how that happened.
Okay, that is great advice. So, George, stay on the line with us. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we will get that phone number at the Kelly firm that you can call, just to, like I said, kind of give a little more, get a little more information to Clint's firm. So we will take a break. When we come back, more on Open Line. You're on the line with us right now. Stay with us, and we'll get to those calls after the break.